The core, and really the original screenwriting book, of course, and that many other screenwriting books are based on, and that I could recommend you look at if you haven't already, if you're studying screenwriting, is Aristotle's Poetics. And a lot of these American screenwriting books are really based on Aristotle's observations on Greek tragedy 2,500 years ago. And some of the key concepts that we still use today, like reversals and catharsis, come from his analysis of Greek tragedy. I think, though, it's interesting just to step back for a second. I think what Aristotle was doing when he was writing the Poetics, it was part of his larger philosophical scheme, which was to work out what the good life was, how we should live, what a good person was, and so on. And that by observing the drama, he was writing the Poetics also in argument with his teacher Plato, who had said that storytellers were liars and shouldn't be allowed into the Republic. He was claiming that there was a set of skills that storytellers had, and that people watching the story or the drama could acquire, that were essentially and very importantly human skills, skills of empathy, skills of identifying with the struggling human on the stage, that we felt pity for that human who had some undeserved misfortune, and we were moved by what happened to them, and we were frightened in case it happened to us, because of course it will happen to us, because we all know we're going to die, for example, and that's critical to the drama. That's critical to life and that movement between life and art. And this kind of thinking runs through the book. I mean, one of his key concepts, I think, is the notion of reversal. And you find this in all dramatic art, the sense of, and this is where surprise often comes as well as a principle, where something unexpected happens. And what we're watching then is how our protagonist deals with this unexpected happen chance, just as we might have to deal with an unexpected bad news or good news. Reversal is about the movement of the character from good fortune to bad fortune, or from bad fortune to good fortune. And the strongest plots accompany a movement within the character from ignorance to knowledge. They realise something at the end they didn't understand at the beginning. And so beginnings and ends are crucial and critical for Aristotle. The strongest plots, he argues, are where something that seemed insignificant at the beginning is the most important thing at the end. Aristotle emphasises plot, actually, over character, and I'll come back to that in a second. For him, the unity of action, Achilles' anger in the Iliad, which leads to the death of his best friend, and the appalling treatment of Hector as his body is dragged around, and the consequence for the Greeks and for the Trojans. The through line, the arc of what Achilles does and doesn't do is what we're following. And it's the outcome of that that is uncertain, that is the crucial thing in the drama. This is why, Aristotle doesn't, he was writing 2,500 years ago, so he doesn't have the benefit of our psychological insight into character or psychology as a way of thinking about human beings. The Iliad and the Odyssey doesn't have characters that have really internal lives in the same way that Hollywood movie characters do, but in a way that modernist drama doesn't have, because it is skeptical about psychology, about the psychological construction of character that we find in mainstream Hollywood movies. The idea that we have motivations, we have objectives, that we know who we are, we know where we're going, and so on and so forth, is something that modernist cinema is very skeptical about. And the idea that we have a unitary self is very skeptical about. But we'll park that for a second. Aristotle's very much at the centre of Hollywood, mainstream cinema and mainstream television. The idea of everything being integrated through cause and effect, the idea that the beginning and end is related to each other, the unity of the action, all provide a powerful emotional experience for the audience. Someone like Brecht, for example, wanted to break that, because what this does is the empathetic connection between the audience and the struggling human in the drama is a kind of enchantment which Brecht wanted to break. So you will find both in theatre and in cinema, a type of cinema that, like someone like Michael Haneke, has a much more objective relationship to his protagonists and his characters. He doesn't pretend that he knows their inner lives in the same way that a Hollywood movie does. You observe his characters in action rather than identify with them. So there are different ways of creating character and creating story, but Aristotle is central to the American style because the American Hollywood form of cinematic narrative evolved very quickly out of the well-made play, which itself was based on rules established in the 16th century, which was a kind of reductive version of Aristotelian rules. So that stream runs right through Western culture and right at the heart of mainstream drama. So understanding Aristotle gives you a real grip on what conventional classical storytelling is about and what it's like.